Welcome to the How of Business with your host, Henry Lopez, the podcast that helps you start, run, and grow your small business. And now, here is your host.
Welcome to this episode of the How of Business. This is Henry Lopez. My guest today is Mordy Hackel. Mordy, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks, Henry. I really appreciate you having me.
Looking forward to this conversation. Technology, of course, continues to change the way that we as small business owners operate, but many owners are still struggling to separate the opportunity from the risk when it comes to technology, especially AI technology. And so entrepreneur and technology expert Mordy Hackel joins me today to explore how a small business can leverage technology to grow and stay competitive, but at the same time protect themselves from emerging cybersecurity threats. You can find all of the How of Business resources, including the show notes page for this episode at thehowofbusiness.com, as well as information on my one-on-one and group coaching programs. And I invite you to consider joining this podcast, our podcast community, the How of Business community on Patreon, and subscribe wherever you might be listening so you don't miss any new episodes. Let me tell you a little bit more about Mordy, and then we'll get into the conversation. Mordy Hackel is the founder and principal of KJ Technology. KJ Technology is a Manhattan-based managed IT firm, and he's been building it since 1998. His path there was anything but straight, and we're going to explore that a little bit, starting on Wall Street, pivoting through a game design startup, and cutting his teeth doing IT for the NBA, Sony Music, and Citibank. But today, Mordy helps small and growing businesses use technology as a true force multiplier with deep expertise in cybersecurity, compliance, and fractional CTO leadership. Mordy is also the host of his own podcast, the Ventures and Visionaries podcast. Mordy lives in New York City. And so once again, Mordy Hackel, welcome to the show, sir.
Thank you, Henry. It's an absolute pleasure to be here. It's funny that you mentioned the NBA. I don't think about that. It was so long ago, but a funny story. The then Commissioner David Stern was in the elevator, and I was in my 20s, and I was an IT guy, and he had just grown a beard, and he had seen me and goes, "Nice."
That was your connection to him.
Yeah, I didn't really have much to do with him. I was just, on the desk doing work. Yeah.
And of course, the Knicks just win the championship, so that brought it all back around, I'm sure.
Bring it on.
Crazy.
The Commissioner Silver was there at the time as well, and I think I may have fixed his laptop once or twice.
Is that right? Wow. Well, this conversation happened because you happen to know my son-in-law, who works for a company from who you offer us IT services. So thanks to Colin for connecting us. I appreciate it, Colin.
Thank you, Colin.
He'll be listening. He gave me a couple of questions to ask in here, so I'm prepared with those. But I always am interested in the journey. You, what did you study at university?
I was an econ major.
And what did you think you were going to do when you grew up?
Oh, so, I clearly wasn't smart enough to finish the physics major that I thought I was going to do, or the finance major that I thought I was going to do after that. Math and we diverged after some time after, Calc 1, and that was pretty much the end of that. So econ was the ability to take a lot of what I had done and finish it. And I always understood that business, technology, those kinds of things were things that I enjoyed and were interested in. How exactly that was going to be, I don't know. I was just kind of hopeful at the time. I don't know that I had a plan.
Interesting, because I was terrible at math as well, and yet I ended up in IT also, right? Back then, our age, or at least my age, you were told that to go into IT, you had to have math skills. And I was terrible at math. I'm still terrible at math. And yet here we are, right?
It's fascinating. Yeah. It's, I don't know that the lack of math on that level held me back from doing anything other than advanced thinking. And what I mean by that is, say, you're trying to project out certain kinds of behaviors, or scaling out a business, or understanding demand, things that most entrepreneurs do on a muscle and feel basis rather than mathematical modeling. And the truth is, at the size that many of our listeners and many of the companies in the United States are, I don't know that it's necessary, but understanding the math does have a lot of value.
It does, yeah, the fundamentals of it. What I found is that what I ended up having to learn was just the basic math of business, which is really rather basic, and even I can handle that with a calculator. Yeah. Did you aspire to be a business owner when you were younger, or what were the thoughts?
It was always in the back of my mind. I don't know that there was a burning passion for it. And, my family members were, not entrepreneurial per se, although there was a time where, Dad did attempt a business for a little bit. And you could see that he was happiest at that time, even though the business ultimately did not succeed. So maybe that somehow resonated with me. But there was always a difference between feeling like you own something or trying to build something that you have an emotional connection to. And I think that's true for employees as well. I don't think that that's different, but I think creating a resonance between the human and the work, probably for me, that's about, the ability to serve. Other people probably connect some other way, but I think that that's key to being successful in general, forget whether entrepreneurial or not.
Yeah, great point. That makes sense. So tell me briefly the story. What led you to founding KJ Technology?
So it's a great story. I really credit my father-in-law of blessed memory. He insisted that I wanted to get married, and he said, you need to get a job. So that's how I got into technology. And then
you were in between jobs at the time. Is that what was going on, or?
Yeah, the games business failed, and I had to figure out what to do. And he said, you need to get a job. And I said, okay. So I got a job in technology. And that's how I did all the consulting gigs at the bigger companies.
I see.
And then at some point, that business was not doing so well. And I believed in the customer service model of technology, which, if you remember the late 90s, that was not such a huge thing. In any event, IT folks in those days were known as being brash, and not empathic and not interested in solving problems, or maybe interested in solving problems their way. And, you reboot the computer and lose everybody's data, or, like that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Well, we solved the Y2K problem. So we thought that was it. That was our big challenge.
Yeah, the planes didn't fall out of the sky. I guess that's something.
Exactly.
Yeah, that was certainly interesting times. Spending a lot of hours trying to patch a lot of computers manually. Mm-hmm. Thank God that's been fixed.
So you needed an opportunity, and what did you have some clients you felt you could serve? What led you to take this leap?
Yeah, so we had my business partner's dad had just sold a business, and he told us that he would, help us out. So that was a little bit of taking the risk out of the equation. Mm-hmm. And at the same time, a couple of our clients were, I mentioned that I was leaving. I said, you obviously should stay with your company, but, a couple of them short time after were not receiving any service. So they called us, and that was a very nice thing for us to be able to start out with a little bit of revenue. Because at the end of the day, we were bootstrapping the company. The financing was really a stopgap in the event that we needed it. It was more of that kind of commitment rather than here's a bunch of money and just spend it in a indiscriminate fashion on, lovely offices. And yeah, that was the approach. And the truth is it made us independent in a hurry.
So your partner is John, right? That's who you partnered
Yes.
with initially, and you're still partners.
Yes. He's still the J and KJ.
Why do you think this partnership has worked so long over all these years?
I think that there's an honesty factor. We've taken on subsequently one more partner, and there's an honesty factor that I think doesn't often exist in partnerships. Look, you're going to step on toes. It's a relationship like any other, and there are going to be problems. There are going to be issues. People are going to get call it their feelings hurt, or whatever the situation is, or they're going to, and at the same time, when you realize that somebody's heart's in the right place and they're coming at it because they want to do good, then forgiveness can be found and a path forward can be forged. Admittedly, it's never easy, but if the good of the whole is a clarion call, then I think it works. And the truth is, the proof's in the pudding. It's been 30 years.
Yeah, it's tremendous. I think you touch on what's a key. I've mostly been in partnerships in my business ventures, and that's one of the key things my business partner always mentioned is that we felt like we had each other's backs. But what I talk about often, Mordy, on the show is the alignment is the hard thing, right? Because over those 30 years, life changes, your needs changes, your partner's needs changes. So I found that you've got to continue to be honest with each other and communicate to stay in alignment as to what you each want and need from the business. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's definitely a true statement. I guess everyone says this in a way that I always found a little bit trite, and that is the only thing you can count on is change. But the truth is, it's the only thing that is. And if you're trying to be in the moment, then be in the moment. But if you're trying to anticipate what will happen tomorrow, you can have a generally good idea, but that doesn't mean that it will be.
Yeah, I also have found that it is part of being an entrepreneur that you almost embrace that change. You realize you accept that change is inevitable. If you expect something to be the same and not change much, then you may not be cut out to be an entrepreneur, because that's just what comes with the territory, is what I've found.
I think you're right, Henry. I would say that perhaps even a step further. I think the getting a charge, getting an excitement out of change, finding the idea that these are truly opportunities to, everyone uses the word exploit, but it's not really exploit. No one's trying to exploit an opportunity. You're trying to use it to your advantage,
Leverage
or
it,
help people leverage, whatever the word is. I think that entrepreneurs, because of their size and their ability to be nimble, if their mindset's nimble, then they have an opportunity to take advantage and come to market in a very interesting way. Someone was telling me the other day, which I don't know if this is true or not, but obviously as the work environment changes in general, they anticipate that almost everybody will come to work almost like a solopreneur, because so much of the show up to a meeting as an entry-level person and take notes can now be done by a machine.
Right.
And the basic work of creating a spreadsheet or a PowerPoint can be done with greater or lesser degree by a machine. So, certainly low-level coding can be done by a machine, and maybe this is our entry into the AI conversation. I don't know. You'll tell me. But the idea that we now have the ability to do things in a more interesting way. So that means that I, as a worker in the economy, need to think deeply and hard as to, well, what do I have that's unique in this world? What makes me special? Why would anyone want to hire me? And that obviously, translate to a business too, but why would this business want to keep me? How can I be valuable? And I think that if everybody focused on that, I think a lot of the problems that exist in the workplace today would just vanish.
Interesting. Yeah, no, we'll definitely explore that some more. But let's level set. Tell us briefly at a high level the services that KJ Technology offers your clients today. This is Henry Lopez, briefly pausing this episode to invite you to schedule a free coaching consultation with me. I welcome the opportunity to chat with you about your business plans and offer the guidance and accountability that we all need to achieve success. As an experienced small business owner myself, I understand the challenges you're experiencing, and often it's about helping you ask the right questions to help you make progress towards achieving your goals. Whether it's getting started with your first business or growing and maybe exiting your existing small business, I can help you get there. To find out more about my business coaching services and to schedule your free coaching consultation, please visit thehowofbusiness.com. Take that next step today towards finally realizing your business ownership dreams. I look forward to speaking with you soon.
Yeah, so, KJ Technology was always a services business. We do obviously partner with a lot of the manufacturers, whether it be hardware or cloud, and that's been, KJ2 or 3 or 4.0 or any of those. And we would resell some of those services and set them up and configure them. And so we do services that breaks down to a couple of different areas. Advisory services, helping people figure out, what are you trying to do with your business and how does that relate to the technology, and using that as a force multiplier. And that could be anything from cloud, security, AI, all those areas. That typically gets folded into a lot of the work that we do for the smaller businesses, maybe less than 100 people. In those companies, we tend to offer a holistic package. You generally don't have anybody who's responsible for technology in that area, right, and will do, for lack of a better term, an outsource of that entire function. So it starts with, strategy, design, roadmap, budget, and helps, alleviate the need for a fractional director of technology. And then we bring in the engineering and the projects, as well as the help desk, and helping people with whatever they need, from, I can't connect to the Wi-Fi, all the way to, I'm trying to forecast out, we think we're going to hire 3 to 7 to 12 people next year. We want to make sure their onboarding experience is delightful, because that's kind of what our business is about. And every time we've bought computers and they never came right, and they were broken, and they have to work from home, and they're not connecting to the Wi-Fi, and they can't get on the Zoom, or they can't get on the Teams, or these problems are everybody's problems. So
Right.
creating streamlined approaches and building in the right kinds of automation and, really, how do you think about all this? Like, I think that a lot of people just think, oh, it's technology. It's like a toaster. Maybe it is, but I have never found that the use of the technology the way you want to is in fact like a toaster.
And so when you think about that ideal client that is a fit for you, what does that look like generally at a high level? How do they bring you in? How do they leverage you in your services? Give me a little bit more about the role that you play within that organization. How does that look when it's done
Yeah.
well?
So let's talk about the middle model because I think that that's something that most people can relate to.
Fair.
The middle model is, a full outsource. So let's say, a company of, 15, 20 people. Maybe that's a little too large for our listeners. Maybe not. I don't know. But if you're a company of a particular size and you've reached the point where managing your technology has become too complex for you, we can step in. And what that means is rather than you worrying about most of the identities that people need to have, an identity would be, I, Mordy Hackel, log in as Mordy at KJ Technology to a particular system. And we have in most businesses that are small, there's got to be at least 5 to 10 different cloud systems that you're interacting with. The bigger ones, some of them are 40, 50, 60. The more of these systems that you have, the more complicated it is. So how do I know that if somebody, God forbid, left the company under bad circumstances, or they just left the company, that I actually decommissioned all their data and moved it to the person that needs to have it? How do I make sure that those systems work with a general degree of liability so I can feel comfortable that it's working properly? Forget about if I have compliance needs, and now I need to actually prove that I did that. So those things become more complicated when you reach the point of five people if you have a lot of complexity like compliance, 10, 15 people if you just need to run a business. And then, advisory services tends to be anybody in the lower end of the middle market. The third piece of our business has been interesting and been a lot of fun and a gift from God, I would say. And that is we do ultra high-end residential work for people that, has gone beyond the abilities of an AV partner. If let's say you're a director of a company or an owner of a hedge fund or, you're CEO of a publicly traded company and you need some business continuity in your home, and your home may also have a number of different staff members, and you're essentially functioning like a small business, and you need to do some quote-unquote pre-flight checklists if you're going to your home down south, and you want to make sure that everything's working before you arrive so that you're able to work. So those kinds of things we tend to do with the slightly more white glove approach.
And then you touch on, it's interesting as I think about it, having started my IT career back in the 80s, you mentioned the point, and nowadays compared to maybe even the 90s, I just had to take you off your credentials off maybe the ERP system and that was about it. Now there's so many disparate systems and things that I might have signed up for as an employee, all of that. But I want to touch on the cybersecurity point for a moment. You put it so well as you say that people, I think small business owners, we can be delusional in thinking that we are too small to be a target, but that often is far from the truth, isn't it, Mordy?
I think you teed me up well. I think that's 100% true. I think the philosophy of security by obscurity is not really a good approach. Security doesn't just mean, oh my God, there's some guy in somebody's basement eating pizza and drinking beer and trying to hack me like you see on television. What's happening in the marketplace today with the proliferation of AI is somebody in another part of the world where English may not be their native language can craft an email that looks very much like, sounds very much like, looks and really pass the sniff test like the CEO of your company. And everyone jokes around. Everybody, they go on LinkedIn and see you joined a new company. So now they're going to send you an email from the CEO of that company saying, hey, CEO said you want to get gift cards. Like, it's inevitable. It's going to happen. The question is, are you going to fall for it? And the issues aren't about our ability to say, oh, I'm so aware. I got the training. I know all about this. But there's urgency that's being created. There's psychological fear. What happens if I let the CEO down? I just started a new job. I can't look like an idiot. They just want some gift cards. How bad could this possibly be? And this looks right, and the email looks right. So now you go ahead and do it. And like the manipulation level that can be done today using tools like AI can really ratchet up what otherwise would be, everyone would joke around about the prince in Nigeria who's trying to give away their money. And my son, who's hilarious, he's like, wouldn't it be sad if there's really a prince in Nigeria who's trying to give away money and nobody's taking it? So mad.
And now what they can do with voice simulation, it's even scarier, Morty. I mean, somebody could actually make a phone call and it would sound like it's you authorizing whatever it is that you've asked me to do on your behalf.
Yeah, so you and I have podcasts and we are online, and you don't need to just take the voice, you can take the video. You have plenty of content from which to sample you or me or anybody else who for whatever reason is doing interviews or has an online presence and recreate the voice. It's not hard at all. So, certainly what we advise our clients is to develop protocols for anything that's at an inflection point, like sharing money, like contract signatures, like authorizing certain kinds of things that are of business critical nature, to have a pre-organized method that this happens at, and don't just do it because someone created a artificial sense of urgency. It's not easy because, we immediately go into fight or flight,
And I've seen where it can be an even bigger challenge for small organizations that are very autocratic. In other words, the boss, that's just the way the boss does, right? They just, he or she just calls and things get done. And larger organizations have those protocols in place more often than not. So that's another reason I've seen why small businesses are much more susceptible, because it would not be out of the realm of possibility that I may not call and ask for something like that, right? As the small business owner.
Yeah, and I'll agree with that. I'll also say that there are other areas that are not just, a phish attempt or, a smish attempt in text, or, a vish, which we spoke about, a voice phone call. Those are certainly very common and very easy to do, but there are a lot of easy other ways to get to people's data. Doing a phone number port or a SIM swap out of a phone is not unheard of. It's not complicated. If you know what you're doing, a lot of these protocols are very easy to manipulate. And having a plan or having a way to check for these kinds of things is important. Making sure that if you are either have access to or are part of a protocol that allows for access, that there's, a second pair of eyes, that there's a good check on this. I got once an email from a friend of mine who claimed, this was back when this was still earlier on in the day, claimed to be, in England, and that his credit cards and his stuff was stolen, and, can I please send him some stuff some cash through Western Union? It's like, and, somebody that I didn't feel particularly close with, but close enough that if he was stuck abroad, like, I would have totally helped him out. Yeah, but it was Friday afternoon at around 3:30, 4 o'clock, and I'm a Sabbath observer, and so is he, and he would have never sent that email on the Sabbath. What is enough to get up your suspicion? Where do you pick up those clues to think about this twice before you go ahead and act in a way that, look, once the cash leaves the system, you're done.
So for a small business owner listening, where on this whole realm, where do they, I think we've touched on it, but where do you recommend that they start to protect themselves?
So I think that's a great question. I think that small businesses have a lot of tools at their disposal. And the first thing they need to start thinking about is education, because that's easy. Awareness, which is not the same as education, trying to raise awareness within the firm. Like, tell a new employee as the CEO, I will never ask you for gift cards unless you see me in the office telling you to go buy those, like that kind of stuff. It's not that hard to know what the top 10 scams are and educate people on that. Additionally, there are a lot of tools out there that are not as expensive as they used to be, and they're certainly within the affordability range of a small business that can be put on your computers and in your mail that can monitor for behavior that looks off. And the Security Operations Center can lock that down. I will caution small business owners, not all SOCs or Security Operations Centers are created equal. A lot of times the salespeople will tell you that they can do things that technically they do not have the ability to do. So that's important to try and figure out if you can, But having the SOC, having the authority to say, Yes, I'm seeing this in my email. This shouldn't be in my email. I'm going to lock this down and let's have you work with your IT guy to unlock it, and better be safe than sorry is certainly a good place to go.
Yeah.
And I think that if you do those two things, you really have protected yourself against the vast majority. And a lot of the other stuff is actually, that's not true. The third part is the patching. Yeah, make sure your computers are up to date.
Got it.
It's for the same reason that people can send you a fish because the AI can allow you to create said issue very quickly and easily, deconstructing vulnerabilities in computers for which patches have already been issued that have not been deployed. The window for between patch release and deconstruction and using that exploit in the wild is just getting shorter because AI can deconstruct those vulnerabilities in a very easy way. So patch regularly.
All right, let's introduce AI. I want to jump to it here from this what can go wrong point, because that's not where I want to spend a lot of the time, because I have chosen, Mordy, to look at AI. I have chosen to bury my head in the sand about the possible negatives of AI,
Okay.
what it can do to destroy jobs, the negatives it can have, not because I don't believe it, but just because I'm choosing to look at all of the positives that the technology can provide for us as individuals and small business owners. Having said that, I do want to touch on it. What is it that a small business owner, though, needs to be aware of when you've got now team members using AI in different ways? What do I need to be worried about there? What do I need to corral?
So firstly, I agree with you that, the opportunities far outweigh the negatives. I also think that the negatives themselves are inevitable. And that goes back to what we had spoken about all the way at the beginning. So think of yourself, if you were a solopreneur, what would you do to invest in yourself to become better? And that drives directly into what you're talking about in terms of the opportunities that people can now bring to the business. If I was a solopreneur and I was contracted to help fix the procurement process, or to fix the service delivery process, or the phone answering process, or whatever it is that you're dealing with. It doesn't matter if you're an HVAC company or if you're selling any kind of other widget. Everybody has three main processes in their business, right? So you have sales, you have services/delivery, and then you have finance and collecting on the money. So like on the most elemental level, those processes need to be addressed, and AI can help with all of those. So how would you help? And then the business needs to think, well, I'm building now intellectual property. Well, what do I do with said intellectual property? You could be vibe coding. What happens with that? You could be trying to stand up a vibe code situation. Well, now you need to deal with the security ramifications or the identity and how much access do people get. And, as we said before, the bigger the company, the greater the complexity. And that's some sort of a logarithmic thing that, again, I said I don't understand the math, so I don't, but I know that it is logarithmic. So it just means that it gets inherently more complicated as more people come into the mix, but it doesn't happen linearly. So it just happens exponentially, meaning like it just grows.
Yeah.
And then you start breaking things down into either the Jeff Bezos, two pizza pie model or even smaller, as people are saying now. But in any event, all that said, I think that the opportunities are immense. And if companies think about them holistically in terms of, like, I'll give you another example. One of the things that KJ is offering now is an AI aggregator solution. We deal with the security problems by creating guardrails around the identity of the people. So for example, I, Mordy Hackel, have access to certain kinds of files. So now I have this aggregator. In this aggregator, I can use Claude, I could use ChatGPT, I can use XAI, I could use a bunch of others of the big models and some of the sub models within those as well. So about 50 or so models when you pull the whole thing together. But I can only access the things that I, Mordy Hackel, have access to. So I can't pull the CEO's data. I can't go into someone else's email. I can't take spreadsheets that I don't have access to and then plug them into the model. And in addition, you want to make sure that you're not training the model with any of your private data, because that's super, super, super dangerous stuff. You never know what's going to wind up getting out there.
You can do that, without throttling down my individual ability within the organization to leverage AI to the fullest.
I'm going to say yes, but it's
for most employees. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a yes with an asterisk. I will say that this tool doesn't work for the power users.
Okay, that's fair.
For the power users, you still need the Claude code and all the rest of those kinds of things.
So is it realistic? Is it a true concern that if I have an environment where I have no controls, I have my own subscription to Claude and Tony over there has his own ChatGPT, and we all have all of the spreadsheets and all of that information, all of the financials, and we might be using our own versions of an LLM to do analysis. What's the exposure really?
The exposure risk is not a risk in the classical sense that, someone's going to come and do bad things with your stuff, assuming everybody's doing the right thing and acting appropriately. The risk is now Tony left, and this was Tony's account, and all that knowledge and institutional knowledge that you built, whether or not it's an application or a particular process or a language model and a marketing brand that you've built around, whatever all that stuff is, it may be lost to you.
Yeah.
So the company once it's out the window, it's gone. And now what?
So it's IP leakage as much as anything else, isn't it? Yep.
Yeah, it's IP leakage. It's
confidential information leakage, could be all of that. Because you came back to you touched on it that in early days, back when I was in IT, everything was centralized and controlled, right? Talking about when it wasn't a service company.
Correct.
The reason vibe coding and all this has come around is that individuals within the organization are trying to solve business problems, and they can't wait for IT to give them allocation or give them time. So they're fixing them themselves, right?
Yes. And it's not just that IT doesn't have the ability to give them the time of day, for lack of a better term. It's that the tools that they have purchased and need integration into don't have the ability to give them the full complement of information that they're looking for. So you bought Salesforce, and in Salesforce, I'm sorry, I hope I'm not using tools that you shouldn't be saying names on. I don't mean this in a bad way, but like in Salesforce, I'm tracking in my CRM, I'm tracking this information of a particular customer, and I built a particular workflow. But in this particular workflow, I don't really have any more information than whatever's been built in there. Right? It's very definitive as to what the compute process is going to be. Mm-hmm. I don't have the ability for me to say, well, what about all these other pieces of data? Does regulation change my process? Are there things that are changing in the market fluctuations that I would love to have built into this particular work process that I would know, so that maybe my procurement or maybe my expenditure or maybe my inventory or maybe whatever it is that I'm managing is now going to be managed not in a more real-time way, but in a more sensitive to optimization of cost. So if I was a big company 100 years ago, I would hire an army of actuaries and they would figure this all out. But now you have the compute tools to be able to build some of these workflows yourself. So I would vibe code something that would potentially create opportunities for me to be much more effective in my cash outlay. And am I doing that in a smart way that can really help my business get more out of the money that I already have? It's a scarce resource. I got what I got, and I can't make more of it. So how do I leverage it in the most effective way? Yeah. I think is almost every business owner's concern.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So Mordy, what I'm seeing, I'm curious as to what you're seeing. You touch a lot more people in this arena, obviously, of IT and AI. But what I'm hearing I'm seeing is two groups forming. And it's funny because it's not unlike what it used to be, it probably still is, as to how many, the small percentage of business owners that had a website, right, versus the ones that didn't. And back then it was just because people just got paralyzed. They didn't know what to do, or they didn't want to get taken. But I see the camp of people who are afraid of it. And so we're only focusing on the negatives and all the bad that it can do, or this unrealistic principle or standard that's getting applied to say, well, it makes mistakes, which is interesting, right? I always have seen that as something that we apply when we're afraid of something. Well, when it's perfect, then let me know, right? But when does that ever happen? So they're shying away from it, and the opportunity is passing them. What do you advise to small business owners as it relates to AI and the adoption of it?
I think that's a great question. May I take a step back for a moment?
Yeah.
So there are two kinds of compute processes. I read this on Reddit, I don't know, a few weeks ago, and I thought that was like really well said. So I'm going to shamelessly steal it. And I don't remember the exact terminologies, but there's a definitive, right? 1 + 1 = 2. If you have a computer do that 1,000,000 times, it'll still come as 1 + 1 = 2. Then you have the non-determinative type of behavior, which is what an LLM is. So LLM is expensive. LLM requires a lot of compute. LLM is a whole bunch of other things. An LLM isn't accurate if that's what you're looking for. So if you're thinking about, will LLM ever become deterministic like a 1 + 1 = 2 calculator, then you're not using the tool correctly. You are trying to fit a different kind of paradigm into what you think this should be. You will not take an LLM and plug it into a calculator. It's a waste of resources, and it's not designed to do what it's being used for. You will probably succeed getting what you need, but you have no idea that it's actually going to be accurate all the time, because it may not be. Moreover, why are you doing this? It's trying to open up a broken pipe in a sink using a hammer. You do far better with a wrench,
I think that's brilliantly said. And I think that's the challenge is it's a matter of learning, how do we apply this tool and for what do we apply this tool?
I think that that's true. When I read the post, I was like, I thought it finally clicked in. Mm-hmm. And obviously, look, many of our listeners may not have a use case today, but let me draw out a scenario. Let's say, like we talked about before, you vibe coded a solution that would really take your CRM or your ERP or whatever it is that you have running today, running your business to the next level, and you would incorporate some other things that you don't currently have. Great. But that comes at a cost. Every single time you run that model to try and do that prediction, you have to spend a lot of tokens or credits or whatever system you're using. There's a cost to that. So if you've used your LLM-based model to build something that then could be turned into a more of a deterministic model, maybe now you've created a hybrid of both models, because those models are far cheaper, much more mainstream, and have had the efficiencies already squeezed, to the point where they're super efficient. So maybe that's a better way to think about how to ultimately extrapolate your cost out long term.
If I'm following you, Mordy, using an LLM, an AI tool to build an app or a tool that then does work for me, that model, am I following you correctly, or did I miss something?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. That thing that now works for me isn't an LLM based thing. It is a regular quote unquote tool.
Yeah, exactly. They can run very efficiently and very economically.
Correct. Yes, but you said that much better. Thank you.
Trying to understand it. There's so much. I make the analogy that for me, as much as I'm trying to stay ahead of it, and I have a technology background, but it's like the newest of the high-speed Japanese trains, and I'm on the outside Mission Impossible side hanging on, flailing, trying to keep up. That's how I feel, right? That's how fast it's moving.
Yeah.
And people like Colin in my life help me stay up to date. But it is really challenging, and it's easy for a small business owner to say, you know what, I don't understand that. I'll just leave that to the young people, or I don't need it. I'll just keep doing what I'm doing. And what's going to happen is small business owners are going to get left behind because others are going to take advantage of it and use it to differentiate, to be more effective, to be more productive.
Yeah, I think that that's true. And if I may, I would offer a potential solution using even the free sets of solutions that are available to pretty much any business owner today, is go on to some of these tools that you've heard of, whether it's Gemini or ChatGPT, Claude. Go on and say, I am a small business owner. If you want to put in your industry, you want to put in your revenue, by all means, give some context and say, I really want to learn a little bit more about how AI can improve my business. What would be your top 10 suggestions of the things that I should learn over the next 60, 90, 120 days, whatever it is? And then start digging in from there. It doesn't need to be anything that is, so far ahead of anybody else. You can create an opportunity to teach yourself. And I think there are a lot of people in the world like you, Henry, who are in the coaching space, who have the ability to, help people understand that a tool is a tool is a tool. The tool does not have any inherent moral, I'm going to use the word judgment for lack of a better term. 100 years ago, you could use a hammer, well, maybe with the exception of guns, but you could use a hammer to bash someone's skull in, and you could use a hammer to build a house. And you can, similarly with the tool these days, I think these tools don't have any inherent life or morality, judgment, or any of those things on their own.
Yeah.
I think they're a tool.
Yeah.
And people can use them for good and people can, God forbid, not.
No, I love that advice for a small business owner. I think that's spot on, Morty. That's what I would advise as well. So thanks for sharing
Yeah.
that. What do you see? When you look out there into the vision? You're a visionary kind of guy. What do you think is going to happen? What are we going to see that's exciting over the next several years?
I'm not even excited about the next 5 years. I'm excited about the now. The now, you and I have a similar background from the IT perspective. I stuck it out. So I've seen we had the centralized system, and then we went to client server, and then we went to very big client server farms, and it was from the office, it migrated to the cloud, and now we're building on top of all those evolutions. What I'm seeing today is a additional compute model that didn't exist before. So I now have the ability to truly think creatively without a lot of extra cycles. So if I'm stuck because I have a writer's block, I know I need to put together something on a page, I don't know what to say. Here's what I'm struggling with. You can tell any of these models to help you write a draft. And then once you have it on the page, well, now you can play with it. Similarly, with any business solution, I'm having this problem. I don't know how to think about it. Can you help me put this together? I think you and I talked at the beginning of the show, and you may or may not ask me, but, we talked about books. One of the books that I found and still do find incredibly enlightening is The Goal, by Dr. Ellie. The Goldratt, exactly.
That book has kind of
Goldrat's
fallen out of favor, but it's such a classic about my biggest take. Sorry to interrupt you, but constraints, understanding the concept of constraints. Yeah.
So you're coming exactly at where I'm going. So I was playing around with a Claude model the other day about building a theory of constraints around an issue for issue solving purposes. You couldn't do that 5 years ago. Let's say I have a hard time expressing why these two things that I think are in conflict, why that's bothering me. I can say, use the theory of constraints to build a model to say, pick whatever thing you're worried about, right? Like, why do I want to deal with global optimum versus local optimum? And how do I create that in a particular business that I have? For example, I'm an electrician. Do I want to optimize my purchasing for blankety blank based on local optimum or global optimum? And then, Goldratt obviously has a very clear answer to that. Global optimum is bad. I'm sorry. Local optimum is bad. Yeah, local optimum is bad. But building an evaporating cloud model, if you don't know what it means, please read the book. This was life-changing. And building a model that'll help you think through an issue. I think that's
and it's available to us
today.
Now, Morty. It's available to you, and that used to be in the realm of large corporations with access to huge computers or scientific study at a university. You and I now have that level of compute power at our fingertips, and how it makes us that much more powerful.
It's incredibly exciting.
It's incredibly exciting. The point you made, I often because I do a lot of writing, as all of us do, experience writer's block. There should be no more writer's block. There's no such thing anymore, because what gets you past writer's block, as you articulated, is get me started. And that's what an LLM can do, is get me started. I think it's brilliant. I'm fascinated with all of it that's coming. I just, for the first time a few weeks ago, was in a Waymo, the totally autonomous vehicle in Miami. First time ever.
Cool.
It was a fantastic experience. I felt like I was riding the future, and I was just fascinated by it, because again, how that technology, I think about, if nothing else, as I age, maybe within my age, I'll still have a level of autonomy, even beyond the point that I should be physically driving. And that's just one of the many realms that I think about where it can be applied. But for small business owners, it's so critical that we leverage this in the right way. So what are you looking forward to next with KJ? What's next for you and KJ Technology?
I think the AI advisory services have been very good for us. I wouldn't say that we are an ideation company, even though I certainly can help in that front. However, we have been an infrastructure company roughly our entire life, so I'll call it an infrastructure and security. So if you are vibe coding today and you need help standing up an application that you've taken from concept phase and you want to start building that into a workable model that can integrate into your company, and you can start leveraging that for helping your business be more successful, I think that is something that we are going to be very helpful with and have a lot of experience with.
What did I not ask you about, Morty, that you were wanting to share, especially as it relates to either cybersecurity or AI? Is there anything that I didn't ask you about that you thought we should talk about?
Henry, I ask that question whenever I interview somebody or when I go onto a sales call. And I think it's a great question. Off the top of my head, I can't think of anything, to be completely honest, because I think you did a really masterful job of guiding this conversation. And I'm very, very grateful.
Thank you. Hopefully we'll have you come back and explore these topics, because obviously this is moving so fast and there's so much there to digest. What's one thing you want us to take away if I'm a small business owner or even an aspiring small business owner? What's one thing you want us to take away from this conversation that we had?
I would say it's a couple of things. The first one is don't be afraid. Really, I know it's a double negative and really embrace it. It's coming whether you want it or not. You may as well enjoy it and have fun with it and see what you can do. And, around the turn of the year, everyone was, having fun with ChatGPT, roasting them and giving them the year in review and their psychological paranoia score and all those. Have fun with it. Have fun with it. And it doesn't need to be a burden. And it may help you do what you do better. And then the second thing is there's a smart way to take this stuff and operationalize it. And then there are ways that will probably harm you in the long run. So just be thoughtful about the way you proceed and talk to people who are in this industry so maybe they can help you.
Where do we go to find out more about you and KJ Technology?
Yeah, so I'm on LinkedIn. It's just search for my name, Mordy, Mordy Hackel, just like it appears on the screen. And, you can reach out to me that way. You can also email info@kjtechnology.com. K as in kilo, J as in Juliet, and the word technology that ends with a Y. I don't know why people often make it plural, but it's singular. So KJ Technology. And the Ventures and Visionaries podcast is, we didn't even talk about that, but.
Yeah, you are, what season are you in of that podcast?
I think we're in the middle of season 2, which went a lot longer than season 1. We'll see. We'll probably cap it at some point.
Who is it ideally for, that podcast? Who do you recommend it for?
So I think that is much more for individuals who are looking to understand where they're going in their career. And I try to bring on people who've been successful in business who can share wisdom with the listeners about, it's now I'm a young person. I'm going into a new world. What do I do? Or I'm in the middle of my career. I need to make a change. What do I do? How do I think about it? Where's my value? Those kinds of issues, and getting people to find ideas to springboard off of.
Mordy, great conversation. You and I could talk forever. Obviously, we'd love to have you back on the show soon, but thanks for taking the time and for sharing and being with me here today.
Thank you for having me. This was delightful, and I appreciate you asking the questions in such a kind and thoughtful way.
Thank you. This is Henry Lopez. Thanks for joining us for this episode of The How of Business. My guest again today, Mordy Hackel. I release new episodes every Monday morning. You can find the show everywhere you listen to podcasts, including the How of Business YouTube channel, my website, thehowofbusiness.com. Thanks again for listening.
Thank you for listening to The How of Business. For more information about our coaching programs, online courses, show notes pages, links, and other resources, please visit thehowofbusiness.com.